Master Key of Wisdom. And we're currently on chapter or step 4. We also do these Master Key classes via video as well, and that should be accessible so you can watch the video. And what's happening is I am providing commentary based on my experience with this with Grandmaster and being taught these principles directly, which we refer to as a direct transmission. So I'm not going to just read the book verbatim because I'm pretty sure you can do that yourself. So what I'm going to do is provide commentary based on the life experiences I have as it relates to these specific key or specific teaching. You'll also notice, as I mentioned in the last class, the video class last week, that on the left-hand side, if you're looking at the book, you'll see there's calligraphy. Pardon me. And that calligraphy was literally made by Grandmaster, actually eternal Grandmaster, which means he is past, right? Once you pass, you become an eternal master or an eternal Grandmaster. So we had these calligraphy hanging up throughout our training centers and our anjas, ashram type. And so we basically, since I was a young man, 16 years old, looked at these hanging in the various studios and halls. And so, united we stand and divided we fall. And all of these principles you'd be surrounded with. And the theory behind it was the principles themselves would be there. And now, if you've gone through any of this training, like the 8 vessels or a lot of this, Qigong was very intense, what they call Huigong training. And you would be burning, like if you've ever done yoga maybe, and you're in a warrior posture for 5 minutes. It burns. It gets your attention. And you're sitting or standing in this case, and you're gazing at these things. And what happens is there's almost a subconscious burning that happens because it's basically a controlled trauma. When you're in these postures, your body is experiencing a little bit of or a tremendous amount of discomfort. And it's almost a way of programming, if you will, you psychologically and subconsciously. So when I look at these, these calligraphy drawings, it's kind of like a little a mind seal that kind of sends you back to the moment. So I'll just give you a little insight on that. So they're not just some random characters in the book. These are very specific and significant characters. So let's go ahead and look at the concept of leaving behind the good seeds. I'll read like maybe the first page, and then I'll just go through the highlights for you as they, again, pertain to my personal experience with the great Grandmaster. So the 4th step of Mudo is to prepare to leave behind a legacy of good seeds for your children and coming generations. We come into the world with nothing, gather our material goods for a time, and then leave the world with nothing. To be remembered, we must leave behind a spiritual legacy of balance, harmony, peace, joy, and great internal and external power. This is the good fruit with the good seeds. These are the principles of creating such a legacy. So, number 1, I'll go through the bullets on page 78. Life is a challenge for good and for bad. It's your choice. That's very actually profound, and I've heard it said to me many, many times. And, well, there's different things that will come up in life, of course, where you're forced to make a decision, and what's going to be the long-term impact on this and those around me. But really what it points to is a principle even greater, and that's the principle or concept of free will. Really what's happening is, as a human being in the human realm, we hold a unique opportunity and position as a being of free will. Now, you might take it for granted, but really, if you look at the different realms of manifestation or existence as it relates to the Taoist and Buddhist tradition, there's a human realm, but above the human realm is like the saint kind of realm, the demigod realm, and then God realm. Below, there's an animal realm, then the hungry ghost realm, and demon realm. Okay, now these realms basically will manifest here in life, but also in different realms, but actually in your life. You can be in this life and actually be living in a hungry ghost realm, more like an addict, or an animal realm, more like a violent criminal kind of thing. when you're in those states or in those realms, you don't really enjoy free will. Even a saint doesn't have free will. They're compelled to do the right thing, if you will, or adhere to the way, And so a human being is unique in which it has choice. And that realm of free will creates what we have now. And a lot of people will struggle with that because they'll say, hey, if God was such a good being, how can they allow such suffering? You'll hear that a lot. I don't believe in God because no God would create, such a shit show of a reality that causes so much suffering. Look at war, look at famine. You can go on and on. Yeah, well, God isn't. It's free will. God gave you the free will. The Tao gave you the free will. And so when you want the free will, you have choice. And that's the price we pay. Also, there's that spark. Because the only other creature that has a free will would be the God realm. So when you say we're made in the image of God, well, do we look like God? Not, I don't know. I can't guarantee it. There's some, Sumerian teachings that will argue that. I think it has more to do with the image of that which can create. Now, a cow cannot make a condominium. It's just not what happens. They kind of reproduce. They may duplicate, but they don't create. So there's this creative spark that a human being has. That is free will. And so you can go deep and argue that's where the war in heaven came from, if you know anything about that, where it's like, hey, why would you give these talking monkeys free will? They're not qualified. Let's prove it. We can go down that rabbit hole one day for hours. But when we start talking about, for good or for bad, that's the opportunity to earn. It's to show that, given a choice, given the wheel, if you will, you won't crash. And that's how we talk about like earning the opportunity by choosing the Ingan or Chengdo path. The next concept would be the candle is needed in the darkest place. The darkest place is not outside, but inside, near and within you. And they, give you a little story with where should I put the candle. Well, yes, the hardest thing to see in the room is you. It's very easy to see everybody else's, flaws, everybody else's shortcomings, but it's almost impossible to look at yourself. Mirrors are painful things. So when it comes to becoming aware and activating awareness, it's really about turning the light around, as put in the Taoist text, and looking at yourself. Now, it's an interesting thing because it involves ego death. It kind of sucks to look at yourself and really take the ownership. But that's also where you realize free will, and that's also where you realize you have control. You always have a choice, accept it, change it, or walk away. And so that turning the light around involves a certain amount of discipline and awareness. And one of the ways that you can cultivate the ability to do it beyond just, reading about it is training. So when you learn and go through the different training, you realize, hey, okay, your knee has to be pointing in the same direction as your big toe. Your shoulders have to be over your hips. Your hips have to be over your heels. The movement will begin in your foot. It's going to be directed by your waist. It's going to be expressed in the arm. Oh, no, drop your shoulders. Look, and there's this constant adjusting. So as a teacher and a master instructor, usually, I can kind of tell the strength of someone's ego based on how they can take those corrections. A lot of people will get defensive and say, no, I'm doing it, or, get frustrated. There's people that'll laugh because they get embarrassed. There's people that'll get all sad, and there's people that get pissed. Generally speaking, when you light that candle, you're going to get one of three reactions. And so when you're in the training process, it helps you get used to looking at yourself without judgment. You being able to say, you know what, you're right. Oh, yeah, I should do this. And then after a while, you can make your own self-corrections. It's almost like get good at being bad at things because there's humility in it. And as long as you can keep to that growth, you have a shot. You're willing to look at yourself. The problem is once we get, probably out of college, we kind of stop learning because it's considered a weakness if you don't know. So then you just pump up your ego. And even if you don't know, you act like you do. So therefore, we all grow old, but really few of us grow up. It takes about 58 years to grow up, which means there's those constant, turn the light on, light the candle, look at yourself, look at your situation, take ownership for it. No resistance, no attachment, no judgment, and then make the necessary changes. That's that, the clarity. My grandmaster always used to say, when we would be talking about bringing in different apprentices and things like that, the first question he would ask is, well, is he clear? And what he meant by that is, can he clearly see the value of the path and his own nature? Or is he willing to even look at it? We look at the next thing. First, illuminate yourself, and then illuminate the path for your family and loved ones, which goes back to put down your pink, pussy hat and your protest sign and your BLM T-shirt and all your bullshit, and change you first. Make your bed, and you fix you first. If you've got time to protest, you're doing something wrong, because I'm pretty sure you personally are creating a lot of suffering. So, and you're experiencing suffering. If you want to change the world before you get out there and get involved in all this bullshit, change yourself. You stop suffering. You make yourself better. By making yourself better, you're not taking from others. Simply said, don't be an asshole, because that creates suffering. So, no, change you. Change you, and then just in that, which is almost impossible, will basically help. Help by not hurting. First, do no harm. And that's so difficult. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll distract themselves. As opposed to turning that candle on themselves and looking at themselves, they will look at whatever virtuing or whatever canceling or whatever moral high ground, because now they're looking outward, they're pointing fingers outward, so they don't have to look at themselves. They don't have to look at, whether or not they've gone through the necessary evolution and how much suffering they're experiencing and creating for others. They don't look at that. They look at the suffering that they have. They have no free will, and they are being subjugated. Well, the problem with that is now you don't have a chance. Until you realize that, you have free will, you're hoping someone's going to change something to make you happy. So by taking that control, you have a way better chance of reaching that point of harmony. The legacy of Chengdo is good seeds. The legacy of Pado is rotten fruit, meaning Chengdo, right, upright path, Pado, dark path, a downward path. Good seeds, meaning, well, I put this effort in, and it's removing my suffering and removing the suffering of others. I'm benefiting, and so is in everything around me. That would be a good seed of the Chengdo. The Pado is instant gratification. It's, I'm going to do this for my own personal benefit, and it's really not affecting everybody around you positively. You walk away from the table with more, and which is very kind of common, especially in business. But at the end of the day, you always wind up with less, especially when it comes to, you might wind up with more stuff, but you'll have less in the quality of your own, let's say, inner peace and just relationships, ultimately, the things around you. The next step is moving water does not spoil, but stagnant water, waters do. Well, that goes back to the concept of continuing to stir the water, meaning continuing to seek wisdom. See, in the Taoist tradition, water represents the water element, zhi, which is basically kidneys, bladder, endocrine system, reproductive. That's all the deepest essence of you. That's really where intuition comes from. And so the less inner conflict you have and turbidity in your life, the clearer you can see, going back to that clear. Now, stagnant, meaning there's no growth and no movement, well, it's just going to rot, which goes back to growing old but not growing up. That would be stagnant water. The guy that says, well, I've got 40 years of experience doing this. Yeah, well, no, you've got about 38 years of doing the same damn thing over and over again, and 2 years of growth. The rest has been rotting, stagnant water. So there's this, constant need to stir and cultivate Ming, M-I-N-G, which then will reveal, that's the water element, the destiny. That's what Ming means, which will then show you intuitively your contract with the Tao, what you were brought here, why you showed up. That would be revealed. And so that's, where the work comes. Until then, there's always a sense of pensiveness, like, I think I forgot my keys, in the back of your mind, because you should be doing something, but you haven't. I heard this one a million times. You can own material things, but you should not let material things own you. And that's why we weren't allowed to have anything. We didn't have anything. That was it. You're in the cult. You got the uniform you wear. You weren't even allowed to say, like my robe. No, it's not yours. You're going to give that back. The only thing yours is the awareness residing in all of this. Everything else is unstable, impermanent, and you're giving it all back. So it's like, okay, until then, you really couldn't have anything because it'll have you. You're going to attach your ego, your self-worth, and your value to your material. And then when the material is gone, you're gone. And that's where fear of loss comes from, and anxiety and anger and all of the spirits that we talk about, and grief and worry. And it's all based on identifying with material things. Material things you can have if they're in service of you. But it's like everything you own, you really don't own. You're a steward of. You've got to take care of it. And if you don't take care of it, it immediately turns to shit. And if you're not taking care of it, you're paying someone to do something. And that's what happens with a lot of people is they will attach their ego to material things because they seem a little bit more substantial and they seem like they're going to last longer, like a big building or something. And they will, longer than your flesh, but even that is unstable. However, you're not those things. So you're projecting yourself and your value and your power and your worth into those things when in fact you're not. You're that which temporarily is responsible for them. You earn, sure, you have access. Great. But you have responsibility. Not like you can just have access to the car, but you've got to make sure it's maintained or it becomes a danger and a liability. So that's a very interesting thing that a lot of us forget. You can't have it if it can have you. And so the first thing you have to have is yourself and realize, that's the constant. And then everything else is kind of a temporary piece of your reality. Trust is born in the mind. Trust changes. Faith is born in the heart. Faith never changes. So that's an interesting thing because trusting is based on an agreement, but agreements are based on momentary truth, and momentary truth is constantly changing. Faith is based on a deeper awareness principle. Faith is a constant. And these are semantics too. You can flip these words around, but there's a principle here. Like I have this ladder, and I'm going to go up and down this ladder, I don't know, to fix my roof. And it's been on the side of my house for the whole season. I put it up against the wall there, and I'm going to get up there, and I'm ready to roll. But I trust it's going to work. Then 5 rungs up, it breaks. Not until you go up and down do you really have faith. You go up and down that thing a bunch, and you've experienced it, and you've lived it, and you've proved it. Now you can have faith in it. So, trust is something that's fine, and it's a good starting point, but it has to be something that's beyond something you understand in the mind and something that you've actually experienced and are. And so that's a tough one because a lot of people put, a certain amount of trust in things and people, but the people and things haven't really applied themselves and haven't really been tested during adversity. Usually it's easy to trust things when the conditions are right. It's when the conditions go bad, you're kind of left with what you have. Faith is using your invisible eye to see yourself and your loved ones in the state of ingone humanness at the highest potential. So, it's like you can have faith in someone's intention. You might not trust their actions, but you can have faith in the fact that, didn't work out, but this is a good person. You can see the higher intention, and you can even see that, like the master within them. You can see the highest form of humanness within them. Only as much as, by the way, you can see it in yourself. And then from there, at least it gives you some space. It's like, well, there you go. I see, I'm going to, let's hold out for the highest potential of this situation and this individual. And at least, even if it doesn't work out, yeah, there's no judgment. You did the best you could. And so then at least it gets rid of being bitter and feeling like somehow you've been betrayed. We do that a lot in our relationships. We set up these impossible conditions, like with divorce and things like that. It's like, so you're going to, trust that this person is going to be everything you need in the world. But what you need is going to constantly change throughout your life. And sooner or later, there's going to be, I'm trusting you and we've made this agreement. But the problem is the agreement is based on a temporary reality. And so really connecting to the individual on a constant, married, not married, whatever, the relationship is there. There's still mutual respect and even love for the person, even though maybe the details of your life may have changed and the arrangement may have changed. But that doesn't mean you hate the person. You know what I mean? And if they show up at a party, you stomp out of the room. Now you're just a clown because you were basing it on, well, I trusted him. Well, you deserve it at that point because you're very naive. It's all based on temporary truth and a man-made agreement. So, but it's still a human being, and there is parts of that human being. Now, don't get me wrong; if they're extremely, negative, and sure, I understand all of that. But in general, still, why judge? Just move on. Don't be subject to it without resistance, attachment, or judgment. Wisdom is making correct decisions in the spirit of faith. And that's like, you're, and even if it's not, it doesn't look like it's the nicest thing in the moment for the person, but it's the best thing in the long term for that person and you, and more importantly, everybody involved. So it takes a certain amount of wisdom to look past the unfortunate details of a situation, and you make your decisions based on that faith, and that will kind of leave you with less of a bitter, end result within your relationships. Only through faith and wisdom can you achieve a master key and pass it on. When you move along the Chengdu pathway in faith and wisdom, your presence is felt there forever. And again, it's like there's people that the way they manage and the way they deal with the relationships, there's a certain connection, and you can tell there's a certain sincerity, and there's a certain awareness and personal cultivation. And even if it's tough, it's like, wow, he was a hell of a boss, but you respect him, and deep down inside you didn't do the best you could have, and it didn't work out. So what? And the way you were treated, even though it may have been a little straight, was still just, and without a basically personal ridicule, or it wasn't personal. And so keeping to that is a real key piece. It's just, I'm almost remembering the humanness in the individual and accepting the flaw. That doesn't mean you need to support it or be subject to it, but that does, you shouldn't basically judge it. There's an old saying, a Buddha saying, I've got the right to kill you, but I don't have the right to judge you. It's like, how is that fun? How is that nice? Well, that's what they're trying to explain. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a certain amount of wisdom in that, where it's like, I'll take right action, but I'm not going to be mumbling your name when I walk away and cursing you. As a matter of fact, I'll have respect for you or compassion for you. It's just right action's right action. And so it's like not getting involved when we start talking about true, right, and correct. It's really going for the correct thing. And often when you make decisions based on your true emotion in the moment, it really affects the wisdom inside of those decisions. And let's say the faith and the humanity, or the ingun, potential of the individuals involved. But again, turning that light around, looking at something without looking at yourself, really. A lot of resent and a lot of bad decisions and bitterness comes from not being willing to look at yourself. A lot of things we do, a lot of posturing, is almost like hiding behind a fake ego. Then it creates a lot of insecurity, which then creates a lot of resent. So the easiest way to dissolve it, we can talk about it, but it's really what I have found. You've got to move. You've got to train. You've got to push yourself. You've got to find your limit. You've got to see, it's during those moments you grow. You polish the soul with the sword, sword being made of the wuxing, or 5 elements. In other words, the human body is comprised of all 5 elements. And in the Taoist tradition, it's viewed upon as the sword in which consciousness dwells. You'll see that in the samurai tradition as well. As they make the katana, there's literally a spirit in it. That's a whole other story. But there's an evolution in the individual that made it, and there's an evolution, of course, in the individual that flings it. So, by going through these processes and pushing yourself and finding your limit and going a little past it, you develop a little more confidence and self-respect, because you're more than who you think you are. We're often just kind of blinded by what people told us we are, or what our limited view based on what's popular we should be. It's mostly bullshit. And until you get a chance to apply yourself and really push, and then find, oh, wow, I succeeded, I made it through that, that has a big impact on your growth. So there's heat and pressure. You want to see what's inside something? Squeeze it. You want to see what's inside of you? Squeeze you. And you'll see. Could be juice, could be shit. Either way, keep squeezing. And then, that's how we also remove impurities. But each one of these steps, is there really a fourth step? No. It's an 8. It's an infinity loop. There's really no beginning and no end. We can work on one at a time, or all of them simultaneously, or one as it's most relevant or pertinent to the situation. It's like, okay, this is when I should really look at cultivating this particular key, because in this point, it would really benefit me and those around me. So that's basically my personal experiences with this. I still recommend, if you haven't, read through the book itself and kind of glean the story and try to find. What I always do is, as I read these, anything really new, especially, is I look at how does it apply. Can I see this little story playing out in my mind and in my world? And then it has value. But if it doesn't, then it's not overly valuable. Okay. If anyone has any questions or would like me to expound upon anything, you can hit *2 and your hand will pop up on our control panel, and we'll bring you onto the call. And if not, that's fine. This is also recorded, and everybody else will have it sent to them. I know a lot of us can't really sit on a call at 2 in the afternoon or whatever time it is to you. And you will get a notice when the next lesson's coming through, and we'll go through the 8 keys. And when we're done with that, guess what? We'll start the Tao Te Ching. And when we're done with that, we'll start the Wen Tzu. It pretty much doesn't end. It's like there's a lot. But I think the foundation is all in these 8 keys. If that was all you decided to contemplate, read, and study, it would be right there. All right, 1 second. Nick, you are on the call.
Hey, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, I never know what microphone is on these things.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, first I just wanted to say, obviously appreciate you showing up and doing your thing. I get a little bit more exposure than everybody else, and I'm happy that I can invite people. We will get the replays up, and I do encourage, you'll notice, just point out that early on in this whole series, it was like, hey, there's 8 steps, but it actually makes like a figure 8, and each of these principles you could tie directly back to another principle. And the one that comes up the most often, I think, is the first one, which is know yourself, which is something we talk about quite often, both in the Grey Wolf, Master Key, and Guardian Academy, et cetera, And I say that because if this is your first time listening live, or if you're catching a replay, it's your first one, I strongly recommend, even if you've been through it, to go back and listen to 1, 2, and 3, the first, second, and third session. It is like, what is it? A man never steps in the same river twice type stuff. So sometimes you get caught in, I'm busy. I already listened to that. I already get it. I strongly recommend. I go back and I reread the articles, and I re-listen to the audios. So please do that. If you have been here and you want a higher level of proximity or access or exposure to Mike, and or maybe you don't like getting your ass kicked up and down, the block like I do sometimes. Mike's partner Jason, we do breathing every morning. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, don't hesitate to reach out. And if you want to make sure you get the replays, you can subscribe to the Grey Wolf, which is thegraywolf.substack.com. And you'll get the replays and the invites for the forthcoming chapters.
Okay. Well, outstanding. Well, thank you for that. And as always, it's great to see so many people on the call. And again, you can catch also the videos. And I look forward to the next call. Until then, be well.